The night my granddaughter whispered those 7 words into my ear, I felt something cold move through my chest that had nothing to do with the October air. Grandpa, don't go back inside. She knows. I looked down at her, 7 years old, still in her pajamas, bare feet on the cold porch wood, gripping my wrist with both hands the way she used to grip the sides of her crib when she was a baby and didn't want me to leave the room. Her eyes were dry. That was what scared me most. A 7-year-old with dry eyes and a voice that steady has already been frightened for a long time. Who knows what? Sweetheart, I said. She shook her head and looked back through the screen door toward the kitchen, where the lights were still on. Not out here. She whispered. She'll hear. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I spent 34 years as a civil engineer in the state of Georgia. I built bridges. Not the kind of man who startles easily. Not the kind of man who reads danger into a child's nightmare. I had buried a wife, raised a son, and watched that son build a life of his own. I thought I understood the shape of my days. I thought the worst had already found me. I was wrong. My son, Daniel, had married his wife, Rebecca, 11 years before that October night. I will not say I loved her from the start. That would be a lie. And lies are what put us all in that terrible position to begin with. What I will say is that I tried. I came to every holiday. I brought her flowers on her birthday. I stayed quiet when she said things at the dinner table that I disagreed with. Because Daniel loved her, and Daniel's happiness was the only thing I cared about by that point in my life. Their daughter, Lily, was born in the 2nd year of their marriage. And whatever I had felt about Rebecca before that moment dissolved the first afternoon I held that baby. Lily had Daniel's eyes, and something else entirely her own, a particular quality of stillness that made you feel, even when she was an infant, that she was watching the world and forming conclusions. Daniel worked in commercial real estate. He was good at it. Better than I had ever been at anything at his age. And by the time Lily was 5, they had moved into a house in a suburb of Atlanta that I could not have afforded in my best earning years. 4 bedrooms. Oh, yacht. A neighborhood where people jogged in the mornings. I visited when I could. The drive was 2 hours from my house in Macon, and my knees had begun to complain about long car trips. But I made the drive because Lily expected me every other Sunday, and I was not going to be the grandfather who disappointed her. I noticed things over those years. Small things. The way Rebecca would speak over Daniel at dinner when his friends were present. The way she handled the household money Daniel had told me once, somewhat carefully, that she managed the accounts, and I had not pressed him on it because it was not my place. The way she looked at her phone in rooms she thought were empty. I noticed these things and I filed them and I said nothing, because I was a 63-year-old man who had been told, gently and clearly, that his opinions about his daughter-in-law were not required. I want to be honest about that. I had opinions. I kept them to myself. And for a long time I told myself that keeping them to myself was wisdom. The October I am telling you about, Daniel had been traveling for work more than usual. A development project in Charlotte that required him to be there most of the week. Home on weekends. He had been doing this for about 4 months. Lily had started 2nd grade. I had come down the previous Sunday and taken her to the park, and then to the diner she liked on Peachtree. The one with the red vinyl booths. And she had been quieter than usual. I had asked her if everything was all right at school. She had said yes. Then she had said, almost to her grilled cheese rather than to me, Grandpa, how do you think it's bad to keep a secret if the secret is about something scary? I had looked at her for a moment. Who told you to keep a secret? I asked. She said no one. She said she was just asking. And then she asked me if I wanted the other half of her grilled cheese. And the moment passed. I drove home to Macon that evening thinking about it. I told myself it was a child processing something ordinary, a conflict at school, a movie she had seen that was too old for her, something her mother had said in frustration. I told myself these things because they were more comfortable than the alternative. 3 weeks later, I drove back for what was supposed to be a normal Sunday visit. Daniel was in Charlotte. Rebecca had told me on the phone that she had a few errands to run while I was there, and I had said, of course, I'm happy to spend the time with Lily. That was the point. I arrived at 9 in the morning. Rebecca's car was in the driveway. Lily met me at the front door before I had the chance to ring the bell, already in her jacket, as if she had been watching from the window. Can we go somewhere? She said immediately. Not even a hello. Good morning to you too, I said. I was smiling. I was not yet concerned. Grandpa. She looked up at me with that particular stillness of hers. Can we go somewhere first? Before we go inside, I looked over her head into the house. The kitchen light was on. I could hear Rebecca on the phone, her voice low and careful. The kind of low and careful that is deliberate. All right, I said. Let's sit on the porch. That was when she said it. Don't go back inside. She knows. We sat on the front step together, Lily and I, and she leaned against my arm the way she did when she was smaller, and I read to her. And she talked. She talked for a long time. Longer than I have ever heard a 7-year-old talk about one subject. I did not interrupt her. There is a version of me, the version from 20 years ago, who might have rationalized what she said, who might have found the adult explanation for each piece of it. I did not do that. I had already kept quiet too long about too many things. And my granddaughter's bare feet were cold on that porch, and she was not crying, and that was the thing I kept coming back to. She had already moved past the crying part. She had been carrying this long enough to move past it. She told me that her mother had a friend, she called Marcus, who came to the house on the nights Daniel was in Charlotte. She told me Marcus drove a black car and parked it down the street. She told me she had seen her mother hand Marcus papers from Daniel's office, the locked office on the second floor that Daniel kept his work files in, and that she had seen this happen not once, but 3 times. She told me that 2 weeks ago she had woken up in the night and gone to get water, and had heard her mother on the phone in the kitchen saying Daniel's name, and then saying the words before he finds out, and then saying a number that Lily did not understand but knew was a money number because her mother had said dollars after it. Then she told me the part that made my hands go still on my knees. She said her mother had told her, the previous Thursday, that sometimes daddies go away on trips and decide they like the new place better and don't come home. She said her mother had said this in a nice voice, the kind of nice voice that made it worse. She said she had not told her dad because she was scared. She said she was scared of the nice voice more than she would have been scared of a mean one. I sat there on that front step in the October morning with my granddaughter pressed against my arm, and I thought about 34 years of building things that were meant to hold weight. I thought about what it means when a structure has been compromised quietly, from the inside, in the places you cannot see until they fail. You did the right thing telling me. I said, you did exactly the right thing. Don't tell Mom I told you, she said. I won't. Not yet. I took her to the diner with the red vinyl booths, and I let her order whatever she wanted, and I sent Rebecca a text saying we had gone for breakfast. To be back in an hour. While Lily was eating, I stepped outside and stood in the parking lot and called a man I had known for 30 years. A retired attorney named Frank, who had done my estate planning, and who I trusted with the things I did not want to put into a search engine. I told him the outline of what Lily had told me. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, Walter, do not go back into that house today without knowing exactly what you're walking into. And call Daniel. He's in a meeting. I said, then text him that it's urgent and wait for him to call back. Do not tip off the wife. Do not ask her questions. Do not let on that the child told you anything. I went back inside and sat across from Lily and watched her eat a waffle with strawberries, and I kept my face as calm as I have ever kept it in my life. Daniel called me back 40 minutes later. I was in my car in the driveway. Lily inside watching television. Rebecca doing something in the back of the house. I told him what Lily had told me. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough that I checked the screen to make sure we hadn't been disconnected. Then he said, I know about Marcus. I closed my eyes. I've known for about 6 weeks. He said, I hired someone, There's documentation. His voice had the quality of a man who had been rehearsing this conversation in his head, who had run through all the versions of it, who had arrived at a place on the other side of the first wave of it. What I didn't know was the files. Walter. If she has been taking files from my office. She has, I said. Another silence. There's a development deal. He said slowly, I'm in the final stages. $47 million project. If a competitor got access to my client lists, the contract terms, the financing structure, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We talked for 22 minutes. By the end of it, we had a plan. Or the beginning of one. And I had the name and number of Daniel's attorney. And I had instructions that I repeated back to him twice to make sure I had them right. I was to behave normally for the remainder of the day. I was to say nothing to Rebecca. I was to take note of anything I observed. I was to take Lily out of the house for as much of the day as possible, without making it obvious I was doing so. And I was to make sure Lily understood, in whatever words a 7-year-old could hold, that she had done nothing wrong and that her father was going to be all right. That last part was the only part I was not certain I could promise, but I promised it anyway, because she needed to hear it, and because I intended to make it true. I will not tell you that the next several weeks were easy. They were not. Daniel had to continue traveling to Charlotte on his regular schedule so that Rebecca did not suspect he had changed anything. He had to sit across from his wife at the dinner table on weekends and pass the bread and talk about Lily's soccer and give no indication that he had a private investigator's report in a locked drawer at his attorney's office. He told me later that the hardest part was not the anger. The anger, he said, was almost a relief, because at least he understood it. The hardest part was looking at Lily and knowing she had been holding all of that alone in her small body for God knows how long before she found a way to tell someone. Frank connected Daniel with a forensic accountant. This was the part that none of us had been prepared for. Not really. Not in the way you have to be prepared for something once it becomes concrete and documented and real. Over the course of 3 weeks, the accountant found that Rebecca had transferred a total of $231,000 from joint accounts into an account in her name alone, in small enough increments that none of them had individually triggered any automatic flags. She had done this over 14 months, not impulsively, not in a panic. 14 months of quiet, careful, incremental work. The files she had taken from Daniel's office, 3 folders of printed documents and photographs, of 12 additional files taken on her phone had been passed to Marcus, who was not, as it turned out, simply a man she had been having an affair with. Marcus worked for a development firm in Birmingham, a competitor. He had been feeding information back to his employer, and there was evidence that Rebecca had been compensated for it, separately from the money she had moved from the joint accounts. Frank said, when he called me to tell me this part, Walter, your granddaughter didn't just save her father's marriage. She may have saved his company. I sat down when he said that, just sat down right where I was, in the middle of my kitchen, on the tile floor, because my legs decided they were done for the moment. I sat there for a while. I thought about a 7-year-old in her pajamas with bare feet on a cold porch. I thought about the words she had chosen. She knows, not she's doing something bad, not something is wrong. She knows, as if the danger was not in what Rebecca was doing, but in what she was aware of, as if Lily had understood, in whatever way children understand things that they don't yet have the vocabulary for. That being known by that woman was the threat. I thought about the Sunday at the diner when she had asked me about keeping scary secrets. And I thought about how I had told myself it was probably nothing. And I have had to make a kind of peace with that. A slow peace. The imperfect kind. Daniel filed for divorce in November. The filing also included a civil complaint against Marcus and his employer for theft of proprietary business information, and a referral to the district attorney's office regarding the financial transfers. I will not pretend I know everything that happened in the legal proceedings that followed, because I do not. Daniel kept me informed of the broad shape of it, and there were parts he kept from me. I think, because he was protecting me. and I let him do that because I understood it. What I can tell you is this: the civil case was settled. The terms were confidential. The divorce was final in the following spring. Rebecca received what the settlement and the court determined she was entitled to receive, which was considerably less than what she would have received without the documentation of what she had done. And her attorney had apparently advised her that contesting it further would not serve her interests. She moved to a city I will not name. I do not know the details of her current circumstances, and I have decided that I do not need to. There is a version of me that wanted something more dramatic, something that looked more like justice from the outside. I spent some time with that version of myself, and then I let him go. Because Daniel needed me present, and Lily needed me present, and spending energy on a desire for a particular shape of consequence was a luxury I couldn't afford. What I will say about Rebecca is only this: a woman who will look at her 7-year-old daughter and begin, gently and with a nice voice, to prepare that child for her father's absence. That woman has made a series of choices so far from anything I recognize as a parent or a grandparent that I have no framework for them. I leave her to whatever framework she has for herself. Lily's 9 now. She plays soccer on Saturdays, and she is, according to her teacher in a note that Daniel read to me over the phone and that I have thought about many times since, unusually perceptive for her age, and unusually kind, which is a rarer combination than people realize. She visits me in Macon every few weeks, and we go to the diner on Forsyth Street. Not the one with the red vinyl booths, but a new one we found together. And we always get the same thing. And she tells me about school and about her friends and about the books she is reading. She has never, in my presence, brought up what she told me on that porch. I have not brought it up either. I do not know if this is right. I have asked Frank, and I have asked Daniel, and I have even asked a counselor that Daniel found for Lily in the months after the divorce. A woman who seemed to me straightforward and careful in the way that the best professionals are. The counselor said that children often find their own ways to file things, and that Lily seemed to have a strong enough sense of her own value that the events had not fundamentally altered her understanding of herself. She said the most important thing Lily needed to know was that when she had spoken, someone had listened, that I can give her. That, at least, I had done right. There is one more thing I want to tell you, and then I am finished. The week after the divorce was final, Daniel drove down to Macon on a Thursday evening, unannounced, which he had not done since he was in his 20s. He brought Lily. She fell asleep on my couch almost immediately. She had come straight from soccer practice, and her hair was still pulled back and her shin guards were still on. And I covered her with the quilt that had been my wife's. And then Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table, and he put a bottle of bourbon between us that he had brought from Atlanta, and we each had a glass and did not say very much. After a while he said, "She asked me last week if you were going to be okay. I don't know why she asked. I think she worries about you living alone." I looked at him. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were the strongest person I knew," he said, "and that she came by her instincts honestly." We sat there a while longer. The house was quiet the way it is when something that was heavy has been set down. Not fixed. Not the same as before. But set down. Daniel refilled his glass. Outside, a car went by on the street, and then it was quiet again. I thought about bridges. The way you account for every load, every variable, every possibility of failure. And still, there are things you cannot anticipate. The wind changes direction. The ground shifts. A 7-year-old stands on a cold porch in her pajamas and holds your wrist and tells you the things she has been carrying alone. And because she trusted you enough to say it out loud, a structure that was failing holds, "My granddaughter saved us." That is the plain fact of it. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows it was the right thing to do. If you have a child in your life who is trying to tell you something, please, put down whatever you are holding. Get down to their level. Look at their eyes. The ones who have something important to say are often the quietest ones. The ones who have already learned that adults do not always stop to listen. who have already adjusted their expectations downward, who are asking you with the smallest possible voice to be the exception, be the exception. I am begging you, be the exception.